The Geeetech Mizar S, a mid-size printer with a big list of impressive features. We're going to go over those and more next on The Corner. Hello everyone, it's me Jeff. Welcome to my corner. So glad to have you here. This time around we're going to look at the Geeetech Mizar S. Before I begin, I want you to know that I did pay for this printer with my own money. However, Geeetech did contact me and offer me a discount if I would do a review video. So I'm going to share those thoughts with you now. The assembly right out of the box wasn't too bad. The hardest part was actually lining up the gantry to the base. It took me a few tries, but I finally got it. Overall, there was very little to do, probably about 6 to 8 screws and various components to put on. The total time was about 15 minutes to put it all together. The Geeetech Mizar S features a print size of 255 by 255 by 260. Max temperature for the bed is 110, and max temperature for the nozzle is 250 Celsius. Some of the features are dual Z lead screw, anti-backlash nuts, dual gear extruder. It has an interesting auto level feature that requires you to touch to prime it. And now for the peel. The first thing I notice is that you see some air bubbles underneath, so I think we should look under the hood. After opening it up, it looks like there's actually a plastic film here, like a screen protector of sorts. It's an interesting design choice. It has integrated power supply with proper electronic connections. The other wires, though, however, aren't ferruled and they are just tinned. There's a small port here for the cooling fan on the case, which is quite large. This is a proprietary board with 4 stepper motors on it. They have different models, I assume, and that's what the empty spots are for. There's a small boot jumper right here that will come in handy to flash a firmware. This looks like it may be a Wi-Fi port, that's my guess. They're 2208 stepper drivers. They're a little bit older, but they should be quiet. Taking off the shroud, you can see you have a custom hot end with a small controller board to it. This controller board is also for the leveling system, in which you have to touch the nozzle in order for it to engage, and a single small cooling fan inside. The outside of the shroud does have a couple of screw mounting holes for other accessories. Turning the Mizar on, you get the Mizar splash screen. You get your tools, your settings, your printing. There is preheat. It comes with PLA and ABS or cool down. The PLA goes to 190 and 60. The ABS goes to 240 and 90. The heat bit, as I mentioned before, does go up to 110, which is great. You can also set it to custom. The change filament has load and unload. It's quite slow, but it does work. This is a typical movement panel. You have your home button. You have auto leveling or manual, and you have unlock your motors. In the settings, there is the runout filament on or off, English or Chinese. You can turn your buzzer on or off. Your light bulb color changes to white or to color, and it goes through an array of red, green, and blue. You have the About menu with your Marlin firmware, your version number, your baud rate, etc. And then your printing menu. The manual leveling on the Mizar S will make a 9-point mesh. You will simply start the process by hitting the manual level button and follow the on-screen instructions. Basically, you'll be using the paper method at each point to build the mesh. The auto bed leveling does the same thing, but automatically makes its own mesh. You will have to prime the sensor first by touching it with a tool in order to activate it. But after that, it will make the same 9-point mesh. Once the mesh is finished, it will allow you to fine-tune the Z offset and save your Z offset to EEPROM. On the card itself, it comes with instructional videos. They're quite nice and informative. As well as that, you get your manuals, which have a lot of stuff in them, and a troubleshooting guide, which is really nice. A bunch of unsliced models, so you don't have to hunt around. But my main concern is the fact that under the folder for Cura and Repertoire Host, there's no slicer software whatsoever. You'll have to download Cura or whichever slicer you prefer. If you go to the Geeetech website, it does have a Cura slicer profile. For all my tests, I'm actually going to use Prusa slicer, and I'm going to use my default Tronxy XY2 Pro profile because it's basically a very similar machine. The first print on the SD card was a rocket ship. It came out quite nicely. Now this is the stock red filament they gave me. This is my first gripe. Not just Geeetech, but most other filament companies are only giving you a few meters of filament to play with before you actually have to go out and buy. Sometimes there's not even enough filament there for the test models on the card. So I switched out the filament, and the other prints were a nice little vase and your typical owl that comes with some printers. And they look pretty good. So I thought that the printer right off the bat with the pre-sliced files looks very nice. So I ran a quick little all-in-one test with my Prusa profile just to see how it would look with my settings. As you can see, the Mizar S did it pretty good. There's some bridges here, a little bit of retraction, and some overhangs. There's a little bit of stringing, but I think it's because my filament's a tiny bit wet. As tradition dictates, we must start with a benchy, which I've done. It looks pretty good. The profile seems to be just fine. So with the basics out of the way, let's try some other stuff. I went with this Iron Man bust. Now the only problem I see is under the chin, a little bit of cooling. There's a little bit of an overhang there, but it actually came out really nice. Not the best color, I know. I continued on and printed a vase to test the limit of the printer. This came out quite well, but it leads me to another problem. The base stuck to the build plate too well, and it tore off as I was trying to remove the print. But it is a nice vase, and it did test the height limits of the machine. So I do like that. Then I printed Stranger Things Vecna. He looks really good. I wanted to try out this Geeetech silk filament. And this model looks really clean. I can't believe how nice this filament has come out. So I did run the seam all the way along the back, as you can see. But the reason why I ran the seam there was for cleanliness everywhere else. And technically, you would just look at this from the front. I've been printing with this printer for a couple of weeks now, and I printed the Desert Kiss Dice Tower. And as you can see, this came out absolutely phenomenal in this Eryone copper silk. Absolutely beautiful. So the Geeetech Mizar runs for about $375 US at their store and on Amazon. And now for the pros and cons. I'll start with the cons. I don't like the fact that the screen has that plastic little screensaver. It looks like it has air bubbles in it. I think they can just remove it, and that would be fine. Another con is the fact it doesn't have a slicer program or profile on the card. You'll have to download Cura separately, or whatever slicer you use, and either create your own profile or download the PLA profile from Geeetech. I just want to let you know that it's closed source, so you won't be able to modify the firmware at all. And it has custom parts like the hot end. If you want to keep your printer stock without modifying its hardware, you'll have to order the parts from Geeetech. The following points are kind of neutral points. The bed, in a sense, is kind of too sticky, but I don't know if that's a bad thing or not for a 3D printer. The 2208 stepper drivers are a little bit older, but that being said, the loudest part about printing is the retractions. And now for the pros. For a starter printer, it has all the things you would want to have without having to add it later. It has the dual lead screws, auto bed leveling, filament runout, a clone of a dual gear Pontex extruder, and all these features are going to make it a much more enjoyable printing experience for novices and experts alike. You should let me know in the comments down below if you have plans to purchase one or what features you really like about the Geeetech Mizar S. I'll leave a couple of links below for the filament and for the printers I used. As always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you're cruising through the channel, hit subscribe, and until next time, keep on printing.